Hey, everybody. Welcome to Lando Lakers Live. Brian Kamenetzky and Andy Kamenetzky coming to you following tonight's 131-122 win for the Lakers in Game 5 over the Portland Trailblazers. Andy, it's over. The Lakers have officially advanced to the second round of the playoffs for the first time since 2011?
2012. Do you remember who they beat? Because we covered that series.
In that year...
Yes.
It was Oklahoma City, correct?
No. They lost to Oklahoma City in the second round.
They beat
Denver.
The Denver Nuggets. Yes, I knew that.
The Denver Nuggets, the island that you still remain on.
No, I'm assuming they'll advance from that series. Look, hey, they're not out of it yet, Andy. My Nugs are not out of it yet. They might not get back in it, but they're not out of it yet. So tonight, Andy... This was one of those games that really irritates fans. Like it annoys them because no Damian Lillard. The Blazers are already down Zach Collins. They're playing people that most people have never heard of in their front line.
There was a guy they had tonight, Jalen Horde, who was playing for the Blazers. When I say I had no idea that this dude had ever walked the earth until tonight, I had literally never heard of him. And you and I cover this league for a living, and I think pay fairly good attention to what's going on.
Right. I mean, in fact, he played 13 games in the regular season, so he was all over the lineup.
But there are guys sometimes. It's like, I've never seen him play, but I'm vaguely aware of them.
Never
heard of him. Was a living human being.
Didn't know. And kudos to you, Jalen Horde, for making the NBA. So, but the point being here, the Lakers, this was one of those games where you would have preferred, certainly if you're a member of the coaching staff, certainly if you're a fan watching the game, the Lakers come out and just put the game away early. Don't give Portland any hope. Don't let them think they have a chance to win this game that they really shouldn't. And do all that stuff. The Lakers obviously didn't. They scored a lot of points in the first half. They went into the halftime 68-68. That wasn't the issue. But Portland, a couple things were happening. Portland was making a lot of shots, shooting at a very high percentage, shooting an unusually high percentage from three-point range. They were 10 of 14. The flip side of that, Andy, was most of those threes were wide open. The bottom line is the Lakers just weren't working particularly hard. Throughout most of the game, they weren't working particularly hard, but particularly early, they weren't working hard defensively. Can you not hear me?
I can hear you. There's something a little screwy. Continue talking. I'll catch up.
All right. So I will just continue talking. You know what? It's a perfect time to bust out this thing right here and let people know that they can get 20% off a delicious pizza when they use Kamenetzky Brothers as a password. See that? Check out the fancy scrolling thing that I figured out how to use.
Very nice.
It's pretty cool, right? Between that and the Lando Lakers Live watermark at the top right hand of the screen, this is really a fancy production, if you don't mind my saying.
It really is.
So the Lakers just didn't come out with a great deal of intensity. They looked very much like a team that understood and expected that they would win the game in the end. I don't disagree. At no point did I ever really disagree with them. At no point did I think, despite the fact the Lakers weren't playing with a great deal of intensity, that they were ever really in danger of losing the game. It just would have been nice if they made it so the Blazers had no hope.
Well, I mean, it's also, too, you can say it's playing with fire in terms of you never know what's going to happen. I mean, there are plenty of teams that are really confident that they can get through a game, that they know that they're going to end up closing out because they're the better team. And then they find themselves having to play an extra game because they got overconfident. But also, too, the longer you have to keep guys on the court unnecessarily in terms of, the core players who really matter, the more risk there is to somebody twisting an ankle, wrenching a knee, whatever. I mean, if you have an opportunity to get your stars off the floor early, you should always take it. And the Lakers did not take advantage of at least that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a perfect game. It wasn't ideal. It was fine. It was it was fine. And so when you look at what got them from point A to point B, this was one of those games where you look at the star power of the Lakers and go, damn, LeBron James and Anthony Davis combined to shoot 28 of 37 from the floor.
Yeah.
They score, I believe it was 78 of the team's points tonight. Like it was a lot. They did a lot. This was a night where the star power of those guys, LeBron finishes with 36, 10, and 10. Anthony Davis, 43, 9, and 4. The rest of the team was under 40% collectively. A couple good games. KCP had a pretty nice game, particularly from 3, 4 of 9 from 3, gives them a boost on a night where the Lakers, for at least much of the night, until they got he was the only guy who wasn't LeBron or AD who could hit a 3-pointer.
Yeah,
and they need that.
Shot well from outside.
Don't want
he also
those two guys.
He also moved the ball really well. KCP had 5 assists tonight, which ties a season high for him this year. But it's also like triple his average. And I actually asked Frank Vogel about that. Just what it means for these guys, or for this team, when you have sort of the surprise playmakers, just because there's so much every night on LeBron. And, he said, like, they're trying to put an emphasis on that. They're trying to put an emphasis on just moving the ball in general and finding those shots that they want. And KCP in particular tonight, I thought, made some really, really good reads.
What's funny about it, too, is, like, you get the situation where, like, KCP's bad plays look so bad that you forget it makes it so easy to ignore the good ones. Like he had that play in the second half, I believe it was, where clear path baseline, just switches over to the easy. Like, look, it's hard for me to make a left-handed layup. I don't play basketball professionally. So, like I switch to my left hand and try to make a layup. I'm going to miss it. He shouldn't. And like you focus so much on these plays that look really bad that it's easy to forget when he's playing one. Eliminated 4-1. Thank you. I keep saying 3-1. Lakers in 4 is not actually a series. We'll definitely get to the Rockets, potential Rockets or Thunder as the show goes on tonight. I'm looking at the chat, Andy. But it is easy to overlook when he's making good plays because the bad ones tend to look so bad.
I mean, we've now covered KCP for. We've now covered him. Say
that again?
Yeah, I was going to say we've covered KCP now he's been on the team 3 years now. Is that what it is?
I've been 3, 4. So much mana from heaven, Andy. I can't.
Well, just also too. I mean, these years of fruitlessness until this year blur together. Between that and the pandemic, it's really hard to remember where the hell we are. But one thing you learn from watching KCP play game in, game out, he always busts his ass. He plays as hard as any player I've ever covered in terms of on a night-to-night basis. And his decision-making is one of the most jaw-dropping, heart-stopping roller coasters you will ever ride. I mean, there are times where you watch KCP and you're like, what in the F are you doing, man? Like, really, what are you doing? 3 seasons of KCP pointing out. But then there are other times, like tonight, where he made some of the best reads on the floor that, that weren't by somebody like LeBron or AD, who, they're all-stars. They're superstars. You expect them to do that.
And then the disruption defensively. He and Caruso together had 7 steals. And I know steals are not necessarily the end-all, be-all of what constitutes good defense. But, on a night where the effort was inconsistent and the attention to detail was inconsistent, the energy that those guys had was important. And the 4 of 9 from 3, you need someone who isn't the stars to be able to hit shots. I mean, LeBron is on a terrifyingly good stretch right now. I mean, I wrote it down at halftime, and I can update it now. But like at the half, LeBron was 10 of 13. He was 10 of 12 in Game 4. And if you go back to Game 3, where he was 11 of 18, that means just at halftime he was 31 for his last 43 from the floor. Davis has been spectacular over the last couple of games. You don't need a lot. The Lakers don't need, 26 from Kuzma or whatever. You just need guys who are productive enough on most nights. I mean, tonight it really didn't necessarily matter as much just because the Lakers kind of overwhelmed and LeBron and AD were so good. But, one guy hitting 4 of 9 for the Lakers from 3-point range is enough to be the third guy, so to speak. And tonight it was KCP, and it worked out well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other guys need to come through. If some of them, it's not going to be tangible production. Other guys are going to have to put up numbers, particularly when LeBron and AD play at this type of level. There are very few teams in the league that just can keep up with that.
Right.
But somebody has to put up numbers that are, that do show up in the counting stats. Like you do need a little bit of counting stats among your
right. Most guys
among your role players,
and against better teams, you're going to need it. Like
right. I was going to say
if they need more balance than they got tonight overall.
But this also though speaks to why I'm not going to kill them for tonight. They closed out the series. The second half they cranked up a lot and they really controlled it. And I realized Damian Lillard wasn't there. But the point being, had Damian Lillard been there tonight, and maybe it changes the way the Lakers treat the game, maybe it doesn't. But either way, they could very well have lost this. And you want to see them building towards something as they get to either Houston or Oklahoma City. And, those are going to be more difficult challenges, if nothing else, because those teams are going to be at full strength unless something changes. Russell Westbrook's back for Houston. OKC has their players. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a huge deal.
I think
it's not the type of inspiration I would say fans are looking for from this game. But again, they closed it out. It's 4-1. They're going to get some rest, which is nice.
It's so common. It's so easy to overreact. It's so common. Yeah.
And in the meantime, too, LeBron.
The Lillard.
LeBron. I was just going to say, LeBron even said that he's going to be watching the games, the rest of the playoff games, until the Lakers learn their match, just because he's a basketball junkie and that's what he likes to do. But he had said he's going to unplug a bit until the Lakers know for sure who they're playing, and he's just going to allow himself that decompression. And I don't blame him, especially after being one of the guys who absolutely did show up, and also too everything that's going on with the NBA in terms of the real world and the stuff that falls on LeBron because of what he cares about and just who he is in the league. I don't blame him for wanting to turn off his brain a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. Like, there is so much that has been going on, and I think even beyond, the social justice, racial justice questions and the strike and, boycott, whatever you want to call it. I mean, technically it's a strike, but with all of these things going on, the thing that really came through for me is a reminder, and it really put out front, and Paul George started this, last week or earlier in the week or whatever it was, when he talked about the depression he had been feeling. Like I think this was the first week where we really truly understood the mental strain that these guys are under, because from a basketball standpoint, like, the bubble has been a monumental success, and we're watching it at home. Like, look, basketball games all the time. This is so much fun, and here's all this stuff going on. And there are no COVID, nobody's tested positive for COVID. We all expected somebody inside the bubble would test, but none of that has happened. So it's so easy to look at what's been going on and think it's been this very simple and rousing success. And I think what we learned this week is mentally, even before what happened with Jacob Blake and Kenosha, which put an enormous strain on these guys in so many ways, this was really hard, and I don't think we were giving that enough credit.
Yeah, I mean, you could see a lot of what was building up to the point where the players, all decided not to play those games, and they talked with the owners and the league and figured out what more that they wanted as support before they decided to pick things up back again. This is really difficult. I mean, I remember a couple days ago, Frank Vogel was talking about the situation, and he said, for 6 or 7 weeks or however long we've been in the bubble, it's easy to lose track of just how long these guys have been there. And we're not even into round 2 until tomorrow. Toronto and Boston play tomorrow, correct? Beginning round 2. Mm-hmm. We're almost in September, and they will begin. They're not even underway with round 2 fully in terms of all the teams that'll still be in there. They arrived in July. Like, I mean, when you really think about how long, not just that they've been away from their families, their friends, their loved ones, kids, whatever, but also just society. Like all the good things that happen right now, all the bad things, the pandemic, the feeling, obviously, as much as the pandemic has been awful, like, I'm sure for a lot of these guys, there's a feeling of guilt for being separated away from all the horribleness going on in the world. Like, there's a lot for these guys to take in being a part of this. And I think it's actually great that they're being open about it, just so fans can actually get that reminder every now and then of just what's going on, just so they can appreciate it.
It's hard. And what's funny about it is too, Andy, we talked about it a lot. Like, this is going to suck. This is going to suck. This is going to suck. I mean, we spent how much time talking about it on the radio, talking about it on, the happy hour. I mean, tremendous amounts of time. And I forgot, like I kind of was like, I guess, because the first week and a half, it's all NBA bubble life. And look, Kyle Kuzma's fishing, and there's Alex Caruso, and check out Bobby and Toby. The Bobby Toby show is back, and all that's all I did for 3 weeks was rail on how hard this was going to be, and I forgot, and that was my main through line. So, and I think I wonder too. Guys got there, they were they said it's not going to be maybe they kind of relaxed. They're like, oh, it's not so bad, and then it started building up again.
Remember in the beginning, you could see that guys were really unhappy during that initial period where everybody really was confined to their rooms. They didn't have the meal options. You could see that players were unhappy. Then once everything started opening up and they started seeing the things that they could do, there may have been a surprise element for a lot of them in terms of, okay, this isn't that bad. Maybe this is going to be easier than I thought. Mm-hmm. Then you start getting used to the perks that, even though they're nice, they're really nice to have, and these guys are being styled out as much as humanly possible, you're still confined to just that. And these guys, I'm sure, have worked through every bit of variety that Disney World possibly has to offer.
Right, because it's not like they get to park hop. They're not right. And they're not let's go to Sweden today at Epcot, and yesterday we were in Belgium. That's not how this works.
And here's the other thing too that I think probably snuck up on all of these guys, because it's something that it doesn't matter how long you've been in the NBA, if you're LeBron, Melo, some Chris Paul, Tyson Chandler, if you need a reminder that he's on the Rockets, the guys who have been there the longest in the league. This first round is every other day, and that is not typical at all to begin this thing. And I think that pace, combined with the setup, and then combined with the tragedy of Jacob Blake, and the pandemic that's still going on, and all these different things, I imagine that led to this sneaking up on some of these guys, or building that type of anxiety.
If you're Danny Green, you're LeBron, you're these guys with this vast playoff experience, none of it applies. None of the rhythms that you're used to apply. And so you're right. In one city you play every other, and there's no one city you play every other day.
Downtime.
None. And so it's a weird environment. And I think we were, Paul George, and I talked about it on the last broadcast, Paul George, I think, did us a favor by coming out and being so candid about what he was feeling, because, and I'm not saying we can't be critical of players, and we can't be, make the jokes, and we can't do this stuff, because that's part of what we do, and it's part of the gig. And, I'm not apologizing for literally everything. All I'm saying is, it should be done with the understanding of what is actually happening here. And just, in the back of your mind, remember, they are people. And so, we'll see what Paul George comes back with in the next game. And maybe his performance is good and maybe it won't be. And, he's got a track record that is worth scrutinizing and worth analyzing. Nobody has to stop doing their jobs. But I think the whole moral of everything that we're is like these are human beings. They are not here solely for our entertainment. Like that is, if there's a through line for this entire postseason of what these guys are trying to, tell us, that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And so, we should all try to remember that,
I had been very insistent leading up to the bubble and still believe this. Whoever wins this championship will have won under some of the most difficult circumstances we will have ever seen in NBA history, or I'd go so far as to say sports history. I mean, what is being accomplished right now, or eventually will be accomplished, I should say, by whichever team wins. This is really, really hard, especially too I think if you're a team like the Lakers or the Clippers, Bucks, Raptors, any team that has a legit chance of getting to the finals, that makes it even more daunting. Because normally, as you advance in the playoffs, it gets really intense. You and I have covered title runs before, but you can see that anticipation building up with players. Like, they're getting exhausted. And by the time the thing is done, they're cooked. But there's still an excitement that comes with advancing rounds. I would imagine, and I've tried to ask players about this and haven't really had the opportunity, but I would imagine advancing brings some degree of dread in this setup. And that's really difficult to compete on.
Yeah. It's
funny. This is a great comment, by the way, and I apologize. I can't. Oh, it's from at Lynn Johan. It's Running Man with hotels. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah,
that is a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, let's see if you click on it and you can put it right up there on the screen. Isn't that cool? We're working on a new platform. People don't know we started on a new streaming software today. So like we're actually literally learning. It's the first broadcast we've done with it. We're learning all the new toys and things. Like I can do things like this. Boom. That's what you're watching right now, guys. Yeah, look at that. Remind people that they get 20% off a delicious pizza by using our names, Cam Brothers, when you order at either location, West Adams or in Hollywood. Look at all the toys we have, people.
By the way, too, before the game, we had one of our followers on Twitter tweeted us a photo of the two pizzas that he got today from Delicious that he said is going to become part of his pregame ritual now during the playoffs. Those pizzas looked amazing.
They did.
They looked phenomenal. So there you have it. There are a couple other really important questions that we need to get to before we're done, including a fascinating and dare I say critical hairline question that we were asked by Clinton Yates of ESPN during the game. And then also I had a weird thought today. And I'm interested in your opinion on this, Andy, because not a weird basketball thought. Basically, okay, perfect. All right.
Okay. How you don't have to answer me now. How many, if I played if I played a game against James Harden and it was me and as many clones of myself as I thought I needed, how many me's would I need to beat James Harden in a game of 1-on-1? Like it's 7 Bryans versus 1 James Harden, or 10 or 12, like 14. I don't know.
Here's the
not
problem.
Good. I'm not very good at it.
I was going to say, here's part of the problem is 14 of you, just for example, even 14 of you are going to have a very difficult time containing James Harden. But in the meantime,
he can shoot no matter how many of us there are, he can shoot over all of them.
Right. But here's the other problem. One of James Harden will not have a difficult time containing 14 of you. That's the other.
Somebody actually, I put this out on Twitter earlier, and somebody said, like, you only need like 4 or 5 because, he's not Rudy Gobert. If he stands near the basket, you're still going to be able to like figure out a way to get a layup. I'm like, I'm not entirely sure that's true, and he's probably just leaves me to take a lot of mid-range jumpers most of which I'll miss. And I think
if I'm James Harden guarding 14 of you, I camp myself as close to the lane as I can possibly get without 3-second violations. Then I rebound your miss, and there's no way you can contain him on that.
I think this might be the answer. It would be as many of you as you can get to the court, so Harden can't get to the hoop without a charge. Like if we all just form a wall and he literally has to, like we're all set, Rex Chapman style.
James Harden's going to shoot over that. What are you talking about?
4? That is absolutely not the correct answer.
The guy has mastered the step back 3 against professionals.
No, we put the wall out, Andy. Way out, like close to half court.
So
50. There are 50 of us. I'm just saying, this was the thought that occurred to me today. Because
I don't think 50 of you
3 of me cannot beat 1 James Harden. 5 of me probably can. 10 of me? 20?
I don't want to be the hashtag well actually guy, but I'm not even sure 50 of you reaches all the way.
I'm not sure either. But like it's kind of an interesting question. Like when you try to figure out like this is what it gets to is like because people come to us all the time like, oh, I could beat that guy's not that good. Like, and we try to explain to people the 15th guy on a D League roster would show up to your pickup game and annihilate you and everyone that you know. So like it's a really good way of thinking about like the gap between you as a person, a normal human being, versus how good these people are.
Okay, here's the way I'll think about it. 5 of the Monstars could not contain Michael Jordan.
That's true.
You are not Monstars or Michael Jordan.
I knew Monstar.
Right. You
sir, are no Monstar.
Right, but you're not the Monstar or Michael Jordan.
Right.
So if 5 Monstars couldn't contain 1 Michael Jordan, I still stand by my assertion that 50 of you cannot contain James Harden.
I appreciate everybody. Like one person came back with 4. That is so obviously not the right answer.
No, 4 NBA players often have a hard time containing James Harden.
It's a fun question to play around with. All right, so let's look real quick because before we finish with the hairline question, which is again a vital question to it asked by Clinton Yates. Maybe it was just because Lou Dort decided today that he wanted a podium game or something, but like it looked today that especially with Westbrook back, that Houston is the better team here. They're playing particularly well defensively, much better defensively, I think, than most people would have expected.
Well,
first of all, who
really
do you
helps
think
when Lou Dort can't make a shot?
That's actually Monty just asked a good question. What about 5 Lou Dorts? Like I actually like. There's a possibility maybe I could guard 1. Like 30 of me could guard 1 Lou Dort.
Maybe.
I mean, I can't score. Like I don't care how many of me there are. We're not scoring.
I mean, all Lou Dort needs to do is get 1 basket against
and the game is over.
Yeah,
one Lou Dort bucket and the game is over. And so, first of all, who do you think wins? I think Houston wins.
I think Houston's going to win. I was pretty high on OKC heading into this thing, and I've been a Houston skeptic. But right now, it does feel like Houston is just the firepower right now is just too much for OKC to match.
But also because they're playing well, they're actually defending, and I think that was part of it. And granted, Oklahoma City is a good team, but they're not a team that overwhelms you offensively. Today when Schroeder got thrown out of the game, you really saw how difficult it was for them to generate offense. Gallinari's been, and so but the ability of Houston to really defend with a lot of versatile guys, and I like to tell people, I say they are short, they are not small. Harden is a load, Westbrook is a load, PJ Tucker is a load. They got dudes who are big and hefty and can get up on you, and when they defend, it's suddenly a much scarier team, I think, than people thought. For some people, it can be.
I mean, again, I'll be the first to admit I've been a Houston skeptic. So if they end up playing the Lakers, we'll see how it goes. I think the Lakers are going to give them fits with their size that Oklahoma City can't do.
Right.
Because, I mean, they have Steven Adams and Nerlens Noel. And neither one of forget neither one of those guys being as good as Anthony Davis. In certain respects, if nothing else, Nerlens Noel is nowhere close to JaVale or Dwight in terms of what he can bring to the table. He's had a nice season for him, but you certainly get. I would want JaVale or Dwight on the floor more than Noel, and I think, and we'll see if I'm wrong. The issue Houston is going to have is they can't really adjust in terms of personnel. I know that they can make adjustments in terms of the way they play, but in certain ways, functionally, they can only do one thing. And if it's working for them, they're a nightmare to deal with. But if things aren't working, maybe it's just because obviously I don't know the game as well as Mike D'Antoni, but I think the adjustments they're going to have to make.
Don't sell yourself short, Andy.
I do think the adjustments they're going to have to make are very difficult to figure out what they will be.
Yeah, it's funny too, because one of the things that we talk about with the Lakers as worrisome is that they don't necessarily have a lot of different ways that they can go out and beat a team. It's sort of LeBron and AD,
but they can at least go big or small.
Right, they have choices. They have more choices than Houston does. I think what's scary about the Rockets is that, I realize the Lakers have the best two-man combination of any team in the playoffs. I don't think there's any debate over that, especially the way that AD is playing right now. Houston arguably has the second. If Paul George isn't doing what he's sort of expected to do, the Harden, assuming Westbrook is healthy, Westbrook combination. But let's just assume that he is by the time. That's probably the next best one that's available. If not, it's awfully close. I don't
certainly up there. Yeah.
And so and those guys put pressure on teams in ways that are different than 7 games or 6 games of James Harden is so irritating. 6 or 7 games of Russell Westbrook is so irritating. Because of the way those guys play. Harden with the fouls and the million miles an hour that
Westbrook.
that Westbrook goes. It's another kind of mental challenge. And if they're defending, and if they can figure out a way to defend the Lakers inside, because it's not really just this, it's how do they defend LeBron in the post? How do they defend AD down low? How do they keep the Lakers off the boards? I hope, I kind of want to see this series more than I want to see them play Oklahoma City. This is a lot more interesting to me than that one would be.
It's going to be a real test of, in terms of adjustments, in terms of things you look for from Frank Vogel. What do the Lakers do if picture this scenario if you possibly can, Brian? The Lakers have a difficult time making outside shots. Try to imagine a world in which the Lakers are not automatically.
I will yes and through this scenario, crazy as it may be. I will do that because that's what you do.
They're a difficult team, Houston, to deal with playing from behind. They're a very, I think both tactically and psychologically, Houston is going to be a really difficult team. If they get up 10 or 15 on you, I'm not saying the Lakers can't get their way back in because, we've seen they will go on rolls. And also, too, they have the ability to crank it up defensively as good as any team in the league. And, they've got some guards who are capable of, if nothing else, I think, making Harden and Westbrook work. They can throw a lot of different looks at guys.
You'll see LeBron on Harden. You'll see those. It'll be, but looking at, but Kumite's question, do you think the Lakers would lose? No, I don't. But I think it's I know Lakers fans are all upset. All these people who said Portland was going to Charles Barkley and 3 other people said Portland were going to win this series. There were not a lot of people who really thought that I don't think a lot of people will necessarily pick Houston to beat the Lakers, but if Houston is able to defend at a pretty good rate as they've done through a lot of the series against Oklahoma City, this one makes me nervous just because we still don't quite know what 6 or 7 games against Houston means and what it looks like and they're still a really kind of an unknown quantity, at least to me.
I was going to say, particularly they're an unknown quantity against the Lakers because the Lakers only got that one opportunity to play them before the stoppage, and they had just made that trade for Covington. So I mean, like the entire league at that point really didn't even know what Houston looked like, much less the Lakers, which is why the Lakers lost that game, but I don't give much credence to it just because there was a difficult game to scout for. So you're right, though. There is that unknown. There is that unknown factor when it comes to how the Lakers match up against Houston, just because we really don't have much to gauge it on.
All right, and so that'll be something obviously we get a little more into. First of all, when they actually have Houston as an opponent, because right now, Andy, it's not actually the series. Like they actually, Oklahoma City's still alive in that one, so we'll see how it goes. Last thing I want to get to, because this was, again, a fascinating question asked to us by Clinton Yates, our friend over at ESPN, who we love and is a great guy. And he texted us during the show, who is handling their hairline better? Basically, let me see if I can get the exact question. Because we knew exactly what he meant when he asked it. Worse, it was just a question. Worst offender,
asking us.
Yeah, worst offender, LeBron or Caruso. Look, people come to me from all over the country for this sort of thing. I'm like the guy, that, and I think they're hysterical. Those Geico commercials, I think it's the commercials where the guy teaches the people not to be their dad.
Oh, it's so great. That is a great campaign.
We all see it. He has blue hair. We all see it. If remember, you hired him. You're not his assistant. I like that one. And the best is the one with the guy letting him out of the parking space. You don't know him. You don't know him. It's a brilliant commercial. And so, who is handling it better, LeBron or Caruso, in terms of their hair? And I will say, I think objectively speaking, LeBron's might look a little better only because Caruso has a couple disadvantages that I know particularly well. He's got the way it's patterned, and he's a very pale white guy. He's younger, so it's harder to kind of mentally get yourself to the place here. It's it's difficult in your 20s to realize you just got to bick it. It's not easy to make that move. Caruso, every time he gets a haircut, it's a little tighter. And eventually he's just going to go. LeBron, I think, thinks that little stuff right here kind of makes it so we don't know what's happening back here. And he really hasn't tried to tighten it up much at all.
I think this answer is obvious. The answer is Caruso.
Caruso's handling it way better. Yes.
Caruso is maybe not all the way there in terms of where he needs to be, but he recognizes the destination. In terms of where he eventually will go, he just is. I'd say he's driving the speed limit as opposed to just putting the pedal to the metal, go 95 miles an hour. It's an open freeway. Just get yourself there. LeBron,
Stephen Rang says, Andy, on the chat, once it's gone, it's gone. It is, and it's a tough thing. I'm telling you, in your 20s, I started losing. People may or may not. Started losing my hair. I started seeing it go here. Sophomore year in high school.
Yes,
and it's hard. You get to college, everybody thinks you're like a professor or an arc or something. It's hard. It's hard to let these things go. LeBron LeBron's in his 30s, man.
Yeah. Well, just also too. LeBron. Let's be honest about this. I asked you how many papers did you grade in college that people turned into you because they thought you were a professor.
Many, but many, many papers.
But here's the problem, though. LeBron has essentially an hourglass on the top of his head. It's not just a forming balding pattern. It's an irregular forming pattern.
It was Anthony Irwin tonight who called it the World Cup trophy. Yes.
Yeah, it's an hourglass. The guy.
You just got to let it go.
But it's an hourglass with no sand. There's no sand inside the hourglass at all. He's not fooling anybody and he's higher profile. And it's also, too, it's so much more obvious because, and this may be a function of the pandemic. I can't remember exactly how long LeBron's hair was before the stoppage and before the bubble began. It's way too long
on campus.
The reality of the situation. It's way too long.
Yes.
And
basically what he needs to do, like we've shown the picture, Andy, he could go Isaac Hayes here and it would look fantastic.
We were talking with Clinton during this text chain, and he pointed out, and we confirmed this because we were up close to, in particular, this part of Kobe's career. Kobe handled the loss of his hair very well. Not because he was fooling anybody, but because he recognized the situation and he never let it get too long. Like, we could see the balding in its formation. We could see the evolution of Kobe's hair loss. But
as soon as it became visible, he started taking measures.
Yes. Like everything, because, Kobe was an impeccable dresser. I mean, just everything.
Two things made this easier for Kobe. Two things made this easier for Kobe. The first thing is he had an impeccably shaped head. And it is hard to underrate. Like, when you have a perfectly shaped, I will say I am lucky that, okay, I lost my hair when I was really young, but at least I don't have a weird shaped head. Like, I don't have some sort of like giant block or a ridge, or like it's a decent looking head. Like, it could be worse is all I'm saying. Kobe's head was immaculate. Like, the shape of it was perfect. And I'm actually convinced that the only reason there might have even been a slight delay between where he started and where he finished is only because maybe it was slightly misshapen, and just by the force of his will, Andy, Kobe managed to change the shape of his head before he shaved it off. Like, that was how mentally strong Kobe was. He could actually change the shape of his own head just by willing it into existence. And I think that might have been any kind of slight delay. That's it. But
that's when
he handled it.
The moment mentality wasn't just a marketing thing. He's like, holy crap, this really does work.
It's like the opposite of Barry Bonds. It's like Barry Bonds changed the shape of his head, but it required massive amounts of steroids. Kobe just thought about it really hard. Like, that's all it was. But we all, in many ways, it's another way that we could all take lessons from Kobe. All right, so tomorrow, Andy, we're going to try to record a regular podcast with hopefully Kyle Goon, who is inside the bubble from the Southern California news group. He's done some great work from inside the bubble, and he'll tell us, remind us that it's not just the players who might want to get the hell out of there. It's the reporters too.
I've actually been checking in with some of our friends down there just to, like, it's funny, like, hearing Paul George talk about the mental toll on himself, and I don't even think presumably the other players down there, made me realize, like, oh my God, our colleagues down in the bubble, this can't be easy for them either. So I've been trying to check in with some of them.
So we'll be back with that show. Oh, I'm just tweeting out. We'll be back with that show tomorrow, and we'll be back with another one of these live programs when the Lakers play again. I think that's a plan, and be on the lookout for, now that we have this whole fancy thing going, Andy, be on the lookout. The late night show, late night happy hour is coming back. We will have more announcements about that, but we would love to see as many of you there. It's going to be coming back. So we come back soon. We're going to keep that 10 o'clock slot that we've been using for a long time. And a lot going on. And we will see everybody after game 1 against someone. Have a good night.
See you.